I will call to order this last meeting of 2020, December 21st, 2020. All councilors are present with the exception of Councilor Phillips. First item, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let me start by reading the paragraph. In accordance with an act to implement provisions necessary to the health, welfare, and safety of the citizens of Maine in response to the COVID-19 public health emergency, as enacted to read Section G-11 MRSA, Section 403-A, public proceedings through remote access during declaration of state of emergency due to COVID-19. The meeting will be held live at 1 City Hall Plaza in the City Hall Council Chambers with only the allowable number of participants according to the governor's executive orders. Citizens may email questions and public comments on the public hearing agenda items as well as other items this evening to myself at dhamilton@ellsworthmaine.gov prior to and throughout the duration of the meeting. I will add that please list your name and address. If that is not contained in the email, I will not be reading it as a public comment. You're free to send in comments during citizens' comments and or in response to any agenda item, and I will present them. As I always remind people, if you do not hear your comment read, please send it again in case it gets stuck in spam. And I want to make sure that we read all comments that come to us. With that said, we'll move on to rules of order. We follow Robert's Rules of Order and any other rules that we adopt during the annual organizational meeting. Item 4, adoption of minutes from the following meetings of the Ellsworth City Council: September 21st, 2020, regular council meeting; October 19th, 2020, regular council meeting; October 29th, 2020, special council meeting; November 6th, 2020, special council meeting; November 9th, 2020, organizational meeting; November 19th, 2020, special council meeting; and December 2nd, 2020, special council meeting.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous, passes. Item 5, City Manager's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be brief tonight because we have a lengthy agenda, so keep things moving. I just want to let everyone know that City Hall will be closed on the 25th and the 1st in observation of the holidays. We also will be closing at noontime on the 24th so that employees can enjoy a small COVID-compliant holiday gathering here at City Hall. I wanted to give a special thanks out to all the businesses and local folks who supported the No Shave November effort that the Ellsworth Police Department engaged in last month. Through those efforts, we were able to raise a total of $14,780, which we donated to Captain Bobby Dorr of the Ellsworth Fire Department to assist him with his current battle with cancer. To that effect, special thanks to Ellsworth PD Officer Amy Torrey and local resident Jen Robideau, who the two of them combined to make incredible effort for fundraising and raised a lot of the money that we were able to donate to Captain Dorr. The only other thing is I just wanted to make the announcement that as of today, it's official. I executed the 2 solar agreements with Sunrays, and I just wanted to again thank the committee members who worked so diligently to make that transaction take place. And that's all that I have, sir.
Any questions? All right. Seeing no questions, move on to committee reports. Any councilors attend any committees? Councilor Miller.
I attended 2 committees. One of them was the Historical Commission, where they wanted to know if there were any preliminary drawings for the pedestrian and bike path yet. I got an answer today that there were no preliminary drawings and they should be done sometime in January. The Recreation Commission also met, and the ice skating rink should have been gone up today, hopefully. And if we get cold weather, we might be ice skating soon. They also discussed the flag at Whiting Park and made a motion to recommend a tree service provide recommendations concerning this project. That's all I have.
I have attended Harbor Committee and my first time, so I was basically got to know everybody and listened, and I think they have what they're bringing tonight with them anyway, so I'll let them explain it all.
All right, thank you.
We also met as the Emergency Medical Services Committee, and we are currently trying to establish with the Northern Light EMS agreement, trying to come up with something that's beneficial for the city all around. We've looked at also the possibility of even working our way into our own ambulance company, but everything's still up in the air at this point.
Any other counselors? All right, seeing none, we will move on to item 7, citizens' comment. This portion of the agenda where citizens can make comments on any subject they wish. If you'd like to email me your comments, you may do so. If there's anybody here. I do have a couple that came in, so while I'm waiting, let me call these up. Well, first, take the opportunity around the parade. I really want to extend appreciation to Thelma Beal and Kelly Cochran. Thelma has been pulling together the parade, coordinating it for, I won't say how long, but many years. And given the conditions this year where it was off and then it was back on and then it had to be modified and then it was put into place and then it was a downpour, it was a big success. It was non-stop vehicles coming through the entire time, and it was really well run. And in fact, the New York Times photographer was there to take photos, and Ellsworth was in the New York Times because of that. So appreciation for them. Kelly Cochran also wanted to extend her comments. She said, I would like to give a round of heartfelt applause to those who participated in the 40th Annual Christmas Parade. To say the conditions were less than ideal is an understatement. Thank you for showing up and making spirits bright on a soaking wet gray day. Your smiles, waves, and wishes for a Merry Christmas embody the spirit of the season. Thank you for sharing with the community. Kelly Cochran. Then I have another comment here. Provided I can find it. All right. And this is a letter from Elizabeth Artson that she wrote to myself and the future city manager. She wrote it on November 20th, but sent it to me asking me to read it this evening. Dear Councilor Hamilton and future city manager, this week's Ellsworth American reports there are a number of applicants for the positions of city planner and city manager, so this letter comes at an opportune moment in the process. On the front page of the Ellsworth American on October 29th, interim city manager Mosier is quoted as saying, the time of year there's not a lot coming in front of the city planning board, so we have time to find the right person. In that EA and the EA in weeks prior, there have been multiple news articles about more than one solar farm. Note that solar farms fall under city planning. Who would be the right person to be city planner? Someone who is highly trained in planning issues and procedures, has written and worked with multiple comprehensive plans, someone who communicates with city residents, who communicates with groups that are bettering the community, someone approachable, and someone with great ideas based on best practices experience. Someone like Teresa Alexu. The Ellsworth American reported that she chose to resign. I have reason to believe she was fired in part for talking in the community about the comprehensive plan. The city's best choice would have been to rule in favor of the good of the city. Instead of letting her go, one choice could have been to move the responsibility for the city planning position out from under economic development to directly report to the city manager. Moving the city planner's position into its own department needs to be a priority before the position is filled. because economic development is only one part of city planning. City planning is more overarching, covering more topics and issues than just the sector of economic development. The city council needs to fully investigate why and how the city planner was dismissed. Many residents and business owners are recorded as wanting to see the city progress and be successful, advised by a comprehensive plan and more open city government. Once it is determined how it happened that a highly qualified, experienced planner with enthusiasm and vision was let go, we need to create an environment in city government and in City Hall that welcomes new ideas to result in hiring a city manager for Ellsworth's future, as well as a professional city planner in a standalone department directly reporting to the city manager. Sincerely, Elizabeth Betsy Artson. She also asked for a comment. My comment, I did respond to her in email, but I will publicly say that as far as personnel matters, that's the city council is not responsible for that. That's the role within the city. And as far as the comprehensive plan, that has been a subject that's been on the table. Janet Richards had brought it to the city council. It's being discussed in terms of updating that plan, but certainly COVID has put the kind of a break onto that effort. It's because it's a very involved process, and it really needs the input of the community, which obviously is difficult to seek while we're under the current conditions. So the comprehensive plan has been discussed many times and is something that is not being avoided, but is, I think, very much supported to update that plan moving forward. So I don't know if any other councilors have comments? All right. And I don't see any other comments coming through. And nobody in the room, so we will move on to item 8, presentation of awards. First, want to start with Sean Merchant for 5 years with the Ellsworth Police Department. So the City of Ellsworth proudly presents a certificate of service to Sean Merchant in recognition of your 5 years of service as a police officer for the Ellsworth Police Department. Your devotion to duty and loyalty to the community have contributed to the improvement of the City of Ellsworth. Presented this 21st day of December 2020. And then a certificate of service for Richard Fortier. And this is pretty amazing. Certificate of service to Richard Fortier in recognition of your 45 years of service as a volunteer firefighter and captain for the City of Ellsworth Fire Department, and Senator Hale Hose Company. Your devotion to duty and loyalty to the community have contributed to the improvement of the City of Ellsworth, presented this 21st day of December 2020. And that's really remarkable. And we have one more presentation. I'd like to ask Richard Tupper to come forward. So as everyone knows, Richard is retiring. And let me read this first. Presented to Richard Tupper with deepest appreciation for your 35 years of distinguished and devoted service to the Ellsworth Fire Department. Your dedication and leadership contributed greatly to the improvement of the City of Ellsworth and community at large. Volunteer firefighter 1985 to 1988, career firefighter 1989 to 2006, deputy fire chief 2006 to 2011, and fire chief 2011 to 2020. That's a remarkable career. You've certainly helped the city for all these years as a first responder. What you do in terms of leading your crew, but also leading the city in terms of keeping public safety for this many years is really an outstanding achievement, and certainly will be missed, and congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you very much.
Apparently, Richard, that was the highlight, as everybody said.
That was it.
All right, on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda, all items marked with an asterisk are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There'll be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. Number 9, Council Order Number 122000, request of the Harbor Commission to appoint Patrick Downey as a member to the City of Ellsworth Harbor Commission, term to expire on June 30th, 2023. Councilors,
Move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Motion passes. New business. Item 10, public hearing and action on the following applications for new and/or renewal of the following licenses. Madam Clerk, is everything in order with all of these? Yes, great. First is Finelli's of Maine Incorporated, 12 Down East Highway, for renewal of a city Class B license, victular liquor arcade, and renewal of a state restaurant liquor license, malt and vinous. I will open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. If anybody from the community wants to comment, they can send an email. While we're waiting for that, I'll turn to the councilors to see if you have any questions, discussion. Not seeing anything coming through. I'll close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed. Is there a
Mr.
motion?
Chairman, move approval of the request of Finellis for renewal of their license.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Ellsworth CI LLC DBA Ellsworth Comfort Inn, 130 High Street, for renewal of a city lodging license. We'll open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. And while we're waiting to see if there are any public comments coming through, did the councilors have any comments? Not seeing anything coming through. I'll close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed.
Mr. Chairman, move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous, motion passes. All right. Item 11 is a presentation on COVID vaccine education. I'm going to turn this over to Councilor Miller, and then I'll turn it over to Northern Light. There are several individuals who are taking their time this evening to join us and hopefully provide some education to the community. And our hopes will be that we might be able to extract this portion of the agenda and post it on the website so that people can access it afterwards. So, Councilor Miller, turning it over to you.
Thank you, Chairman Hamilton. I've been a pharmacist for 25 years and a disaster pharmacist since 2002. I'm currently working at MDI Hospital where I'm on the COVID vaccination team. I wanted to discuss with you how COVID vaccines work. I'm not going to debate the facts, but I would like people to know how the vaccine works, where they can get answers to questions, and make an informed decision. I believe there's a lot of misinformation and fear out there. I was not on board with the new mRNA vaccines at first either. This is a new way of delivering vaccine and was in large part unknown to me as well. But is not new in terms of research. Moderna discussed this method of delivery at a conference in Boston in 2016. And I know they've been working on it since at least 2010. This process has been researched for years. The vaccine cannot cause an infection or make someone sick with COVID-19. There are really no contraindications to receiving the vaccine, and there's very little chance of being allergic to the vaccine. There have been a few reactions so far out of thousands that have been given. That is why there is a warning that if you have had anaphylaxis in the past, you should receive the vaccine and wait 30 minutes with a healthcare professional before leaving. Typical vaccines for viruses are made from weakened or inactivated virus. But neither of these vaccines are made from the COVID virus. They're made from messenger RNA, or ribonucleic acid, a genetic code that tells cells how to make a protein. After the spike protein is made, it will help the body's immune system make antibiotics to fight the virus. Both of these vaccines are about 95% effective, and in the Moderna study, absolutely no one that received the vaccine became severely ill. These COVID-19 vaccines went through the same rigorous safety assessment as all vaccines do before the Food and Drug Administration authorizes them for use in the United States. This included a large clinical trials and data review by a safety monitoring board. I've researched this process and I've read the studies. I believe this vaccine is safe and effective. I believe it's safer and more effective than current vaccines. This is amazing science. This is probably the way vaccines will be made from now on. And I'm going to get this vaccine on Wednesday. And this will go to the next slide. So how do the messenger RNA vaccines work? Well, the coronavirus is studied with proteins that it uses to enter human cells. And these spikes are where the vaccine is targeted. The genetic code of the virus that makes the spike proteins has been duplicated and turned into a vaccine. This vaccine cannot give you the coronavirus. This is just a small piece of messenger RNA encased in a lipid nanolayer, or fat cell, that will tell your cells to make the spike protein only. The messenger RNA does not last long in your body. It's very fragile, and it's cleared very rapidly. Encasing the messenger RNA in a lipid nanolayer allows it to enter your body and do its job before it's destroyed. The vaccine enters the cells and tells them to produce the spike protein. The messenger RNA never enters the nucleus and does not affect your DNA. The cells produce the coronavirus spike protein, which produces antibodies and triggers your T cells to destroy the coronavirus spike protein. The vaccine is cleared so fast from your body that it does require 2 vaccinations to raise the level of immunity high enough to protect you. The vaccine becomes fully effective 7 to 14 days after your second vaccination. This is an illustration of how the messenger mRNA tells the cells to make the spike protein. The messenger RNA tells the cell to keep putting together a sequence of amino acids that'll build this protein, eventually growing into the COVID spike protein. If you are exposed to the coronavirus after vaccination, your antibodies and T cells will fight the virus and prevent you from becoming severely ill. The most commonly reported side effects or immune response reactions were pain at the injection site. Now I sound like a TV commercial. Tiredness, headache, muscle pain, chills, joint pain, and fever. Of note, more people experience these side effects after the second dose rather than the first dose. So it's important for vaccination providers and recipients to expect that there may be some side effects after either dose, but even more so after the second dose. I don't believe these should be considered side effects. Except for the pain at the injection site, which is normal, all of these effects are your body's normal immune response to the vaccine, and these reactions generally last 24 to 48 hours. A lot of people have asked me what's in the vaccine. So here's a list of the Pfizer-BioNTech emergency use authorization ingredients right from that sheet. The vaccine contains messenger RNA, some ingredients to make the lipid nanolayer, buffers and stabilizers, the diluent. It does not contain any preservatives. There's no egg, and the vial stoppers are not made with natural rubber latex. This is the Moderna vaccine. It's very similar. They're very similar. They built their lipid nanolayer slightly different. That's why the Moderna storage conditions are slightly different than the Pfizer storage conditions. But basically, it's the same thing. It's the mRNA, buffers and stabilizers, the lipid nanolayer, and the diluent. The Moderna vaccine does not contain a preservative either. The vial stoppers, again, are not made with natural latex or rubber. There was a COVE study done by Moderna, and it was designed to try and be representative of the population. With its collaborators, Moderna has selected nearly 100 clinical research sites with representative demography and partnering closely with those sites to ensure volunteers at increased risk of COVID-19 disease are enrolled in the study. The clinical research sites, with the support of the company, are working within their local communities to reach a diverse population. Pfizer-BioNTech also has a similar ongoing study. Oh dear, where'd it go? Oh, it's gonna go here. It's the last page anyway. I have some links that, why did it go away? I don't know if Jason can post them, but there. Anyway, the last slide is just some links that I have that I can post. I don't know if Jason can post them later. But there's to the CDC presentation slides that I found really useful, and to some frequently asked questions on the CDC website. A New England Journal article talking about the COVID-19 vaccine from Pfizer and BioNTech, and it's how much strongly effective it is. The COVE study, which is again the Moderna study, it's a link directly to that, and the ACOG recommendations for pregnant and lactating women, which it does recommend that pregnant and lactating women are offered this vaccine. There's no reason to not vaccinate. Thank you for your time. Please email me or Chair Hamilton with your questions, and I'll answer them at a later time. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Miller. And I'm going to ask John Roden, who's president of Northern Light Maine Coast Memorial Hospital, to introduce, I don't know who's going to speak, so if I can turn it over to you and let you maybe make the introductions.
Thank you, Dale. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you great.
Excellent. That was a great presentation. Thank you for sharing that knowledge. I think there's a lot of questions, and I think that did a nice job answering some of the fears that the public might have as they enter into their phase of hopefully getting the vaccination. So we were asked to come and answer some questions, and I'm happy to bring two people that I think are extremely knowledgeable on this topic. Dr. Jim Jarvis from EMMC, who is our medical director for clinical education, does most of our media work. You might have seen him on NBC last night, and has a tremendous amount of knowledge on this topic, so I think you'll find him very knowledgeable. We also have Dr. Mike Murnick, who most of you probably know. Mike is a senior physician executive at Blue Hill Memorial Hospital, and also covers some of our service lines over at Maine Coast. Kelly Collenberg, who's our director of communications, is on board, as well as myself, who will probably not answer another question for you, because this is so far out of my lane that I wouldn't dare answer one of these questions. But Chair Hamilton will open it up to you and your community for questions that you may have.
Great. Well, thank you, and thank you again for being here. I'm sure, Dr. Jarvis, this is probably you're into your 15th hour today, so appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I guess the starting question, kind of a broad question, but one that I think that all communities are interested in, and trying to help the community align expectations now that the vaccine is being distributed and people are receiving it, is, can you give just a description of what this process is generally going to look like? I know you can't give specific timelines, but just to help the community know what to expect as this moves forward and the vaccine becomes available, how it will be distributed, when, the tiers of the different groups, that kind of information.
So thank you for having us. I'll start. So I'm Dr. Jim Jarvis. I'm a family physician by training. I love that previous presentation. A long time ago, I was a molecular biologist, and things that I theorized 20, 30 years ago are now reality. So I agree that this is amazing technology that created these first two vaccines, and fully agree that they are safe, and it is just a marvel with how they work, using our own biology to assist us in fighting this particular virus, and I imagine it will be used for fighting other viruses in the future. So I preface with that. As you're probably aware, all of the vaccine currently available in the United States was purchased by the federal government, so they control distribution, and we live and unfortunately at times die by what edicts come from them. As far as rollout goes, 3 hospitals in the Northern Light system and 6 total hospitals in the state of Maine received the Pfizer vaccine last week. That's the one that you've heard about that requires the ultra cold temperature. It is an extremely fragile virus or vaccine. And because of its fragility and the fact that it needs to be in that ultra cold, the state of Maine determined that they would limit it initially to the hospitals that had freezers on site. And 6 of those hospitals were determined. I'm happy to say that I was involved in some of the discussion as to how that distribution would occur. We expect that some hospitals may have received their Moderna vaccine, which is the same technology, but does not require that ultra cold temperature today. No Northern Light facility received that today. We expect that most Northern Light facilities will receive it tomorrow, and that will include Blue Hill and Maine Coast Hospital tomorrow, and hope that they will get their vaccine clinics up pretty quickly. Initial decision at the federal level was that vaccine distribution would occur in 3 phases, with the first phase being broken into 3 classes of phase 1A, B, and C. I think the landing page for who is in phase 1A has been pretty clear that would be healthcare workers, and then people living in long-term and skilled facilities and the staff that assist them in those facilities. Phase 1B has actually changed within the last 24 hours. Initially, that was to be essential workers outside of healthcare, so that would be first responders, teachers, people who work in the food supply chain, prisons, and a few other categories. Late yesterday, added to that grouping at the recommendation of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices were individuals over the age of 75. So that was a late addition to that, but adds an extremely large number of people, particularly here in the state of Maine, to that particular category. And then 1C would be those individuals who have pre-existing conditions that would make them more vulnerable to the COVID-19 virus, and then individuals over the age of 65. So again, a very large category. And then we get into phase 2 and phase 3, with phase 3 being the final one for just the general population. Timetable. So clearly we are already vaccinating healthcare workers, and I'm happy that we're doing that. Internally, at the state level, the 4 largest health systems, the Maine Hospital Association and the Maine CDC, agreed that the initial focus needed to be on acute care facilities where we were taking care of patients who are currently positive with COVID-19, and in those institutions to further prioritize based on the likelihood that individuals would come in contact with individuals who are positive for COVID-19. For Northern Light Health, that specifically would be targeting our emergency departments, our intensive care units, and then COVID protected units within all of our institutions. And when I say that it's the workers in those, it is not limited only to providers and nursing staff. We include in that our EVS, our housekeeping staff, our food services people, and any other individual that's going in and out of there. There are a few other areas where people come in contact with the virus, particularly our laboratory people, as they are the ones who deal with all of those swabs that we've been collecting for the last 10 months. And those swabs contain viral elements, and therefore they are at risk, so we included them. There are some challenges with this vaccine. It does seem to cause more intense symptoms after vaccination than we see with other vaccines, and therefore we wanted to make sure that we did not vaccinate an entire workforce, have them all come down with severe symptoms, and then not be able to do their jobs effectively or what we need them to do. So when I say that, we've kind of had a staggered rollout, so I'll use EMMC as the example. So in our intensive care unit, we said we would not vaccinate more than 25% of the staff at any given time in order to make sure that we had an appropriate workforce. Similarly for our emergency department. So there have been some people who are in the next tier within healthcare who have kind of gotten their vaccine, even though they're not ones that are working in those 3 designated areas. And that's because, again, we have the vaccine, we should be using the vaccine, and we are doing this staggered approach. Blue Hill and Maine Coast will be following that same strategy in the coming days, and they should they'll start either tomorrow or Wednesday on their process, and we're excited about that. Timetable going forward, though, is very sketchy. We are pretty sure what the supply chain is between now and the end of December, but we have no clue what the supply chain will look like in January. And that's just simply because, we are beholden to a distribution center and to the manufacturer of the vaccine. We've heard a lot of comments out in the public about delays in production and a lack of some of the basic elements they need to create those vaccines. I am happy to say that in the state of Maine, we have not seen that as a reality for us. And in fact, Eastern Maine, for one, received more of the Pfizer vaccine today than we were expecting, which is just, again, welcomed news. Pfizer itself has said that they do not have production delays, despite what was reported in the media. And Moderna has never said that there was production delays. And so we think that we will be good going into January. But Maine's number one industry is healthcare. So that means we have a lot of healthcare workers we need to get through. Our second industry is the elderly. So when we get into that phase 1B and phase 1C, that's still a whole lot of people. And so I do not foresee that we will be talking about vaccinating the general public until the earliest February, March, April, and maybe even into the early summer, just depending on how things go. If we've learned nothing from this pandemic, it should be that we cannot rely on a steady supply chain, which is sad to say, particularly now that we're 10 months into this, and I've been talking for 10 straight months, and I'm sure John and Mike really would wish I would shut up. But this is what I do for a living now. And so there will be considerable delays. We ask for people to have patience. When we do get to that 1B and 1C categories, there will be some tough decisions to make. How do you prioritize the individual who's 65, has diabetes and heart disease, over the 24-year-old teacher who needs to be in their classroom teaching students? But I will say that one of the things that Maine does well is that we get together as a collective group. We put people in a room who know what they're talking about, who leave their egos at the door, who leave their personal preferences at the door, and make wise decisions for the people of Maine. And I feel very comfortable saying that, not just because I've been fortunate to sit in that room, but more because I'm fortunate to be with the people who sit in the room with me. And with that, I'll start with other questions. So I can talk forever, so please don't let me do that.
Other questions?
Where was the messenger RNA obtained from?
It's a great question. It's actually recombinant material. So what they did was, within 2 days of the genome or the genetic component of this virus being released out worldwide to scientists to use freely, Moderna was able to reverse engineer the messenger RNA that we're seeing, that we're actually using in this vaccine today. One of the welcome changes that happened with this particular virus was that the scientific community decided that politics was not part of science, and that borders were not going to be the boundaries for us to get things done. And so when the genome of this virus was mapped, it was readily shared to scientists around the world. And fortunate that some of them were smart enough to say, hey, let's use this new kind of technique that we've been working on for the last 10 to 20 years and see if we can create something that will be effective. Because they were able to do that in such an unbelievably short amount of time, literally 2 days, they were able to get to a point where they could create something that they could then use in the clinical trials. Clinical trials for vaccines typically take years to unravel. And so the last 9 to 10 months, that's been done with both the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine, with particular ramp up of their studies over the summer months. Those studies aren't done, by the way. Both these vaccines are under what we call emergency use authorization, means that they have not gone through the usual rigorous data collection and analyzing of that data. That will still take months to occur. In fact, we do not expect that Pfizer will have full approval from the FDA until the earliest April, when they will get more data from the people who have been the initial subject matter. The reason why it got that emergency use authorization was, one, these vaccines appear incredibly effective, much more effective than most other vaccines, and two, very, very safe. There were very few severe adverse reactions in either study population. And then, of course, the fact that we're in a pandemic and we need something else in our arsenal in order to stem it. And that's the reason why they got those approval. We do expect at least 2 other vaccines very shortly, and when I say very shortly, in the next 2 to 3 to 4 months to get approval in the same fashion.
There's several rumors online that this vaccine is made up of fetal tissue.
So I can't comment on how they actually, where that process comes from. I believe that's misconstrued about one of the other therapies that we have for COVID-19, specifically one of the monoclonal antibody studies. I believe that initially came from some fetal tissue. This vaccine does not contain anything from fetal tissue, or even from research with fetal tissue. This really is for lack of a better word, this is a manufacturing process that all of our cells in our bodies actually do on a regular basis, and all this has done is really just utilize those factories inside each of our cells to create this particular vaccine.
Do you know, as this starts to roll out to all the different populations, are the large healthcare systems in the position of coordinating all of that so that the public will hear from those entities in terms of who's next, how this process will roll out, or is that yet to be defined, so that people know, when their turn is up and it's available to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will say that right now it is not defined. It isn't even defined within healthcare. It's unfortunate that quantities are in such limited supply that the original designation was to use a hospital-based approach. We know that there are healthcare providers who are not associated with hospitals or health systems, and that's a challenge for us. I look at people who are in particular living situations like group homes and things like that who have not been discussed. We know that our federally qualified health centers are behind in the line for who gets the next set of vaccine. And then we have all of our private practices for physicians, dentists, and other healthcare providers who are not associated in any way with the healthcare system, and therefore the distribution will be slow for them. I think I took at least 2 phone calls today, maybe a few more for some private offices saying, do you have any idea where we are in the line? And the answer is, I don't know that. We are so dependent on the supply chain to make some of those determinations. What I will say is that within our large health systems, we have already shared vaccine into areas where we think it is needed most. And so, again, a remarkable thing for Maine. I can assure you that in big cities right now, where their hospitals are right across the street from each other, no one is calling up and saying, hey, listen, we understand you need 500 more doses of vaccine. We'll readily give you some of ours. I can assure you that happened in the state of Maine and continues to happen right now. We are shifting vaccine in order to make sure that we are doing the greatest good in the shortest amount of time. I will say that Northern Light has offered its assistance to the state, that when we get to that point where we start reaching out to other smaller hospitals and independent practices, that we are very willing to help with that distribution and to assist them in setting up some of the vaccine clinics like we have done within our own system.
Is there any indication as to what the length of immunity would be?
I'm going to let Mike handle that one.
I get to be the first one to say we really don't know yet. This is a rapidly developing science, as we've said, and we have a lot to show for it, but there's an awful lot we don't know. The ongoing studies are the reasons for some of the gaps in coverage and recommendations. The science doesn't say there's a reason not to immunize pregnant women or women that are breastfeeding, but we don't have the studies on that to say it's okay, so the caution there is to recommend against, although ACOG, the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine, and the midwives have all come out and said, why not? So talks of a discussion before you get that immunization if you're pregnant or lactating. But it's just because those studies aren't completed yet to give it the full release and be able to say safely you can give it to everybody. How long it lasts, we don't know. Other coronaviruses give you antibodies and immunity that doesn't last for many years. So all we know is that we generate great antibodies early on from these vaccines. We hope they will carry through as long as we can make them go, but we don't know. The disease has only been causing disease in humans for a little over a year, so we don't know what the long-term effects of the disease are that way. And the vaccines are new and the studies are only about a year old. So we don't know the answer to that one. People are working on combination flu and COVID vaccines. This may be something we have to redo annually to sort of re-up our immunity or adjust for mutations, although that looks to be a slower process. And these vaccines are particularly good at not being knocked out by single mutations like we're seeing around the world now.
I don't have anything to add to that. That was an excellent. That was just excellent. What we know about coronaviruses is that human beings get reinfected with coronaviruses all the time, and no single thing has stopped that prior to now. And so, and we also know that coronaviruses, like influenza, are prone to mutations. And so, if I was to speculate, I would say that this will probably become an annual vaccine in the fall. For us here in the Western Hemisphere and the Northern Hemisphere, and that we'll just continue to get it like we need to do for influenza vaccination. That's my speculation.
So John, because I don't want you to feel left out, maybe directed to you and Kelly both, I'm wondering if maybe we can talk about some connection with the city on a regular basis, whatever that means, it may be every 2 weeks, every month, something that would allow the city to just get updated on what the procedure is, what you know, so that the city can also then participate in educating the community and keeping the community informed, and kind of partner with you in that effort as things move forward.
Absolutely, we'd be more than thrilled to do that. As you know, we had weekly meetings with the city, March, April, May, and June when we're planning for this in the beginning. So we'd be more than happy to do that, and just let us know who we should coordinate with, and we'll get meetings set up on the books.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Everyone okay?
I was going to touch on messenger RNA, but I think we've gone down that road enough. So
Well, John, we have plenty of time if you want to take a shot at it.
John's been one of my best students so far. He constantly reaches out to me and says, "Tell me some more." So.
All right, well, thank you very much. We do appreciate your time. This is helpful for the community to hear and hear it directly from people who know what they're talking about. So thank you for joining us.
You're more than welcome. Thank you for having us, and look forward to doing it again.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And again, thank you, Councilor Miller, for your assistance on
Thank
this.
you.
Okay. Item number 12, Council Order number 122001, request of the Harbor Commission to amend the harbor fee schedule.
Good evening, councilors. On December 9th. I don't have my glasses. Bear with me. Oh, yeah, hey, there they are.
Hey, could you do that again? You weren't on camera yet.
Perfect. They voted to ask if you would approve the increase of a 10% of fees to the following: the 30-foot slips, the 25-foot slips, the float dock, and the walk-on dock, all which are city-owned structures. It'll help us become a little closer to becoming self-sustaining. The increase would equal approximately $2,267.20 per season in revenues.
And the increase in fees still keeps us within the realm of reasonability compared to all of the facilities.
It keeps us really, we're the best deal around. Northeast Harbor is over 2,000 a month. And with the,
We're quite the same as Northeast.
right, but with the increase, we're talking $1,760 for the season. Dice Arts, near as I can tell, is $39.50 for the season. Port Harbor is $39.50 per season, so it's still very cheap.
Any other questions?
It's just gonna get it pretty close to being self-sustaining, right, within
Yep.
very small margins, so.
The last increase was 4 years ago.
I'm just waiting.
Mr. Chair, move to approve the amended harbor fee structure as presented.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous? Motion-
Awesome presentation, Adam.
Thank you. Keep my glasses here this time.
See how quickly that went?
Been a long week to find one.
Item 13, Council Order Number 122002, request of the Public Works Director to authorize repair work to the 2016 International Wheeler Plow Truck Number 44.
Good evening, councilors. So bear with me, I am not a mechanic, so I'm going to try to explain this best I can. We're requesting approval tonight for repair work done by Caldwell Diesel on City Plow Truck number 44. This is our 2016 Wheeler International truck. It's one of our bigger, Wheeler is one of our bigger trucks that we use obviously all winter long for plowing, as well as one of our workhorses in the summer for ditching and hauling and that type of work. We delivered the truck to Caldwell to be diagnosed, parts to be ordered, and repairs to begin. Original diagnostics show the cylinder number 3. Here we go, John. I'm going to try to get this. Dropped an exhaust valve seat, which went down through, damaged the piston, and the piece took out and came out the back end of the turbos. It's in diagnostics. It's kind of, the piece went through and just took out everything with it, is essentially what we're getting at. So final cost diagnostics are happening as the repair work progresses. So we're requesting that council approve a not to exceed amount of $25,000 for the repairs. We have good reason to believe that some of the pieces that were originally, we were questioning whether the turbos could be reused and such, and I think it's going to end up being significantly less than the $25,000 we're requesting, but we want to just request that, as the high end of things. We also, unfortunately, the truck is just out of warranty, so the dealer is going to talk to International about what they call a goodwill credit to see if there's anything that they can do for us there, since the truck literally is just out of warranty. So there's some potential savings there. But we don't know exactly that amount quite yet.
Councilor Phillips.
Do you know if he's had any contact with Navistar International and any work or process has been made towards the goodwill credit?
I believe so. I'm not 100%.
And no amount set at this
We'll
time?
have, actually tomorrow we're going to meet with him to get everything finalized, so I'll have unfortunately more of that tomorrow, but.
Yeah, basically a piece of steel let go within an area that has 10 to 15 thousandths clearance at 1800 RPM and started popping around like a pea in a tin can. It does quite a bit of damage by the time it passes through that, through the valve system and out through the turbo. So when things go sour and something like that, it does quite a bit of damage. That's understandable. It's not a good thing, but I understand what happened.
For the record, I understand the messenger RNA better than I understand what you said.
I know.
My think is this piece of, like John said, this piece of metal went through and ping, 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 all the way out the back.
Oh, it sure does. Yeah.
But,
Is that a pretty standard warranty International has?
so
with
yes, I
every
did
other-
look up the warranties, because I was prepared. And so this is the Navistar warranty we have. It's generally a 5-year warranty. And that's because we're considered like an emergency vehicle type thing. That's not the standard warranty for like a contractor, so we kind of get an extended warranty essentially.
Yeah.
But the unfortunate part is this is a 2016 that we bought in late 2015, so we're literally just out of warranty.
It's a necessity. The truck has to be used.
And that's it. It's plow season. It's one of our major runs. I do have a good feeling that it'll be significantly less than what we're requesting, but I want to ask for it just for the safety of.
That'll be in
case.
the minutes, too.
What's that?
Your comment will be in the minutes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Less is more, right?
All right. Any other questions? Is there a motion?
Mr.
Mr. Chairman,
Chairman,
move to approve the payment for repair services for highway truck number 44 in an amount not to exceed $25,000 to be funded from the Highway Department General Fund. Vehicle equipment and maintenance, 1030300-52032.
second.
We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Thank you.
Unanimous.
See, Lisa, it's working good. Great presentation.
I set her up for a good one.
Good lead-in from Mr. Wilson.
Item 14, public hearing and action on amendments to the City of Ellsworth Code of Ordinances, Chapter 34, Personnel Ordinance.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Counselor. Mr. Chairman, this is Dwight Jolton.
Dwight,
Wait.
We are,
Dwight, you're jumping ahead.
We're on item 14.
oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I know you're eager. We'll get to you.
Great presentation, Dwight.
Good evening, counselors. So I've given you the Chapter 34 with necessary revisions based on the state's new law that will be going into place on January 1st with earned paid leave, requiring that every employer with more than 10 employees provide at least 40 hours of earned paid leave, and that's earned every 40 hours you work, you earn 1 hour. And so Attorney Hamer has worked with me to write those revisions into Chapter 34, and I believe I've made them yellow in the presentations that I gave you to make them a little easier for you to locate. The easiest way to explain it is that we took the credit away, so that you no longer use one credit to purchase your 5 days of leave. It's just sort of part of the package, if you will. And if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer those.
Yeah, I have one question. We have absolutely no choice, do we?
We do not.
That's what I thought.
That's what it seems like.
We tried very hard, Chief Mosier and I worked very hard to try to tighten it up even more than the state law, but we failed.
We were advised that you do not have to allow it to be carried over. No, excuse me, you have to allow it to be carried over, but you do not have to pay it out at the end. So if someone were to separate from the city, they wouldn't be owed that earned leave time, but they would be allowed to carry it over from year to year.
Public hearing?
Oh, this is a public hearing, you're right. I'll open the public hearing for any comments. Give it a second. And while we're waiting, I would like to just point out and apologize, the camera does not pick up the person at the podium. Part of it is just the way we're configured. It's as far as the camera will go. So I don't think you're able to be seen from the podium.
I'm okay with that.
So, just so the public knows, we'll work on that. It's also true in some other, when I was doing presentations, so we'll try to address that going forward and work out the kinks with this. And I'm not seeing any comments on that, so I'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the Chapter 34 Personnel Ordinance, Chapter 5, as described, to accommodate the state of Maine legal requirements of earned paid leave, accruals, and usage as requested by the city HR department and with advisement from the city attorney.
Second.
A motion, a second. Any further discussion?
I just have a question. Do we have to make an amendment for that, for what you were talking about, or was that already just in there?
It's in there.
It's in there, okay.
I did
Okay.
confirm with Attorney Hamer that it's written in there correctly.
Okay, all right.
All those in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Dwight, we're coming to you. Item 15, public hearing and action on amendments to the City of Ellsworth Code of Ordinances, Chapter 14, Licenses and Permits Ordinance.
Okay, thank you very much. As we've been talking, for a couple of situations we had last summer with vendors coming in and selling lobster and other products and basically very cheaply competing with our local vendors and salespeople who pay taxes in town. We got together and we realized we had a section 422 in Chapter 14 on transient seller licenses. And after reviewing this and talking with staff, we decided we'd like to go that avenue with this. And it would basically cover all the circumstances we have with the people coming in and selling lobster or blueberries or any product set up on private property for a short period of time. And it does increase the fee. We were charging them $10. It does increase the fee to, I believe it's $110 in the ordinance. But it's still very reasonable compared to what they can get. We're going to stretch it out for 30 days. It can be 30 consecutive days, or it can be 30 days scattered throughout the year. The code office will keep track of that, and they can also extend it for another 30 days if they want to pay that fee again.
Okay, what I'm going to do is open the public hearing so that the public can weigh in, and then we can discuss while we're waiting to see if there are any comments. So I'll open the public hearing. And Councilor Kaplan.
Is there any designation? Because the way it reads, it just says, any merchandise, food, cooked or raw, or service other than their own place of business. That could cover Girl Scout cookies for, trying to sell Girl Scout cookies. Or sometimes you get these meat packages and the people go door to door and sell them. How does that work into all of this?
Well, the only part we actually added to that was food cooked or raw. The sale of any merchandise has always been in existence in that ordinance. It's always been there. I don't think we can make a change to this if the council wanted to exempt nonprofits such as Girl Scouts and things like that. We'd be more than happy to do that. But like I said, the whole question about any sale of merchandise has been in existence since I've been here. I've been here 15 years.
Do you have a question about, does this have any impact on the farmer's market?
No, they're exempt. This basically covered someone this producing a product from outside the community, bringing it in, and selling from street corners to private lots, not on public property, of course, but on private lots. The farmers markets, they're licensed through the state of Maine, that's a whole different process. We're just trying to close that gap to deal with some of the complaints we had last summer.
And I don't see any questions coming in from the public. So I'll close the public hearing. Any further questions, counselors, comments?
I'm not sure I'm comfortable with this ordinance. Well, somebody wants to come in and sell blueberries or potatoes or something, we're gonna charge them $110 to do that? I don't know if I agree with that. I don't agree with it.
If we do it for 30 days, right?
Yeah. Well, if they don't want to, if they're just here for a week and they don't want, we're discouraging business from coming to Ellsworth, and I don't like that at all.
Well, actually, if I may, the goal is not to discourage business. The goal is to reward, if you will, our local businesses who are here and pay taxes, and to protect them from folks from the outside coming in and out of the back of their truck, taking revenue away from those businesses who are in our town, who are established, who have storefronts, who pay a significant amount of taxes to support their business. And these are folks who are coming from outlying communities and pull into a parking lot with a cooler full of lobsters or shrimp or some other product and sit there for the day and may make, several $100s and then they're off again. So the goal is certainly not to deter business from coming to Ellsworth, but it's more in line with protecting the businesses that we have and the folks who are paying taxes to the city.
I understand that, but one of the people that did that, he used to sell out of his truck, and now he is here. So, I mean, it's a way to build your business. I feel like we're just, kicking the little guy.
I would certainly feel more comfortable if I saw the nonprofit in writing on here, in the wording.
What does the farmer's market, like the guy that comes and sells potatoes out of the back of the truck? He's a farmer selling potatoes. I mean, it doesn't.
I think it's how it's set up. Dwight, can you address that? The difference between somebody selling?
Yes, if you're selling from your own property, you need nothing from the city. But if you go to even if you show up and sell potatoes out of the back of your truck at Walmart's parking lot, you'd have to pay the fee.
Right.
And we're open to any suggestions. We were assigned this task, so nothing here is really, something we're not willing to look at, that's certain.
Dwight, Councilor Lyons' question was, he was asking what distinguishes the farmer's market and that makes them different from, say, the potato farmer who comes in to sell his product.
The farmer's market has always been basically, I guess the only difference is they're licensed through the state to operate the farmer's market. And usually those are local farmers, certainly not all of them are from Ellsworth, they come from, communities outside of Ellsworth, but the purpose is to show up and sell their products that they've grown or crafted themselves.
So, Dwight, does this does not distinguish between if somebody sold for one Saturday versus the entire summer? Is it, they pay the fee if they're going to sell, correct? Regardless of duration?
That's correct.
Is
That's correct.
Is there a way of this, because I could see a situation where if somebody one day, that's less impactful than somebody who is going to do it every single weekend or every single weeknight. And that's where I would support around an ordinance that would say, yeah, they have to pay a little bit more. They're establishing a business for a long period of time versus somebody that might come in and just sell for a couple of days, after they pick strawberries or whatever it might be. I wonder, I don't know what your reaction to that might be, but that
No,
might be a middle ground.
I think that would be more fair, yeah.
Part of the difficulty with that approach is policing of that. So when you have someone who shows up in a parking lot and they're there, and then by the time we have any ability to respond to them, to get information from them, it's typically on weekends, and we don't have code available, so because that's what we were doing largely this past summer with the vendors, is we were going and we were meeting with them to enforce the current fee of, was it $10, Dwight?
Yes, $10.
So we would go and meet with them to try to extract that $10 fee, and it became difficult and time consuming in many instances to track these people down, because again, they're very transient, they're fly by night, one day they may be in Walmart, the next day they may be over at Main Coast, the next day they may be in Napa. So they're fluid, they bounce around, and it's difficult to enforce a day here, a day there, but it's certainly something that can be considered.
And how does this impact literally the door-to-door salesman, the Snap-on tool guy, or the Schwann's guy, or even the ice cream man? How does this impact him if they're door-to-door, because they're still considered transient, and they don't have an established business in Ellsworth, but they're well-established outside of Ellsworth?
I think, and that's a good question, and I don't really have an answer, but this all came about because some of the local businesses felt threatened by these vendors coming in, setting up, not paying anything for rent to set up in the lot. Most businesses are happy to have them because it draws traffic into their parking areas in hopes that they're gonna get some of those people in their stores. So we've operated, like I said, for 14 years with no issues with the way it was set up at all. This, like I said, this came about, we were asked to look into it, to come up with a way to try to levy a fee that would be fair, but also somewhat protect taxpayers that have businesses in Ellsworth. Again, we're willing to make any amendments to this, or we're willing to leave it the way it is, whatever the council chooses.
I'm not sure, under section D, some of that, I'm not sure exactly how it works, with the ice cream and stuff, but if it's for future delivery, then they're exempt. It's selling by list, catalog, or merchandise for future delivery, this is mostly like cash and carry that is being impacted this time. I think Swans and those are, you order and then it comes like the next week.
Yeah, but I know that there's a guy that sells meats, he's not with Schwann's, I think it's out of Dover.
And you just pay and take it right at that moment?
Right.
Okay, so we can.
You do that with Swans too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, the ice cream man, he's got the little, I don't know if we have one in Ellsworth, he's got the little musical thing and he's going around selling ice cream.
They are licensed, they're under a mobile vending unit, the ice cream truck.
Last year, because of COVID, again, one of the lobstermen I know was selling the stuff online and then meeting you in the parking lot. So that is at a later date. So with that person that shows up in the parking lot just to give out their lobster that was already pre-purchased, how are they? They would be under D.
So, Council Phillips makes good, it sounds like there's more work that needs to be done to look at it, to see if we want to move forward with it. So does it suggest that maybe we just table the item and revisit it at some future date? That's yeah, I did close it.
Move to table.
Second.
All those in favor of tabling the item? Item is tabled.
Make it a little more exciting for Dwight, more discussions.
All right. Item 16, public hearing and action on amendments to the City of Ellsworth Code of Ordinances, Chapter 23, Noise Ordinance.
Yes, also, this came about last year. We had several complaints about our business and noise from live music and things like that. And I kept trying to go over and address the situation and work with the two parties, and the only way that I could do it was to use a sound meter, but the property owner was upset because the ordinance didn't allow me to use a sound meter. So, in fairness to the police department, and the chief, suppose you can talk on this, the way the ordinance reads it leaves each individual that responds is they determine with their own hearing whether it's too loud or not. As I get older, sounds that may have been loud when I was a kid, they're not so loud now. So I did get a sound meter, and it worked out very well. And I could show the neighbor the sound levels for cars going by, compared to the compressor running and music. And I think this would be a good amendment to make, and that way the police department, which handles a lot of the noise complaints, would at least have a definitive way to measure or meter how loud the sounds are.
So let me just open the public hearing so that public can weigh in. So public hearing is open in case anybody wants to send in a comment. Councilors, questions, comments?
I got a couple. I know it's mentions about construction vehicles and et cetera, et cetera. On several occasions in the last couple of years, I've worked overnight hauling concrete to like Hannaford and Shaw's to do repairs at their facilities. So that would be no more. All winter long, logging companies and us to include, you try to get something done, the roads are posted, so you're trying to do it during the evening hours and early mornings, and that would put a stop to that. I just can't support something like that myself. We aren't allowed to do it any other time. I mean, people are gonna wait 3 months to get the house,
Well, this really doesn't really address that section. This is only if a police officer feels they need to use it. It's not something they're gonna ride up to your vehicle, and we already had set hours that construction work can take place between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. was not a quiet period in Ellsworth. We have checked up on loggers before, running chippers at midnight and things like that. But this section really is to address noises being created by a neighbor or someone like that, not really industrial or commercial equipment.
So maybe
His
we,
home, yes, go ahead.
maybe you could like rewrite that and just talk about the music. I mean, I'm certain you're talking about like people having a party at the house with the stereo cranked, and that's probably about where we're at with that, right? It's not nothing to do with trucks driving through Ellsworth, or going to Walmart. And I read a whole section about construction, the whole part about construction vehicles. That's what got me concerned.
Yeah.
Councilor Kaplan?
Doesn't this say that it's 90 decibels for more than 30 minutes? So
That's correct.
When I was at Hannaford pouring concrete, I was at 90 decibels for all night long probably, so, and they can't do it during the day, they can't do it until 10 o'clock, until, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, so.
Councilor Phillips?
I think the whole purpose of this, from what I can see, and Glenn can back me up, manager, police chief, multifaceted individual that he is, basically allows his staff to carry a meter that can measure it and have something that's subjective rather than driving in the site and going, man, that's loud. It's something that he can have in hand that can be used either because of the complaint or something subjective, not subjective, but something concrete to work with. it doesn't change anything else. It just allows that to happen, is the way I understand it, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So the complaints that Gene was, mentioning, we frequently deal with those type of complaints. The logging issues, other construction, trash pickup, I mean, you name it, over the years, we've dealt with all of it. When you combine residential with industrial, whether it be in a downtown setting or, the growth that we're seeing out in the more rural areas of our community, you start to run into problems where, particularly in the summertime, people have their windows open and now there's this noise that's coming from, out in the woods 5 miles away from their residence. And so what this noise meter enables us to do is, instead of an officer going there one morning and the officer who gets there sits there and thinks, well, that's not that loud. Then the next morning a different officer goes and that officer's perception of it is, yeah, if I was trying to sleep, that is annoying. So it takes away that individual decision-making, if you will, and it gives them a concrete way to be able to say, okay, this falls within the criteria, it's beyond the allowable noise, and then from there, the officer then would still have discretion as to what, action is taken. And more often than not, in those particular instances, the officers meet with the source of the noise, and depending on the situation, whether it be construction noise or something of that nature, a agreeable decision is made as to how can we mitigate this? How can we, I know of one where we had a logging outfit that was going out there because it was cold. They were starting their trucks to let them warm up their processors like an hour before they were going to actually start doing work. And so we reduced that time period, so they were only going out a half hour. And, with the property owners and the businesses, we're generally able to negotiate some sort of agreement that everyone can live with. But the meter, particularly dealing with nuisance types noise, things that are ongoing problems that we're getting consistent complaints about, that meter would just give us a tool to be able to say, okay, we have to enforce this ordinance because it's a consistent violation of the noise ordinance. It's not a short-term thing. It's prolonged. It's going on day after day after day, week after week after week, and we need to resolve it. So it would just give us that opportunity and that tool to be able to do it without it being up to the individual on any given day as to whether the noise is excessive.
Have two comments from John Stein, the owner-manager of Fogtown Brewing Company. First is, will downtown businesses be given some information to help them navigate these new ordinances, or some testing of their business upon request to make sure they're compliant? Dwight, you can't see me looking at you, but I'm staring right at you.
Okay, I can't. I'm sorry. That would not be a problem at all. We've worked quite close with John, his establishment over the years, so any businesses, we'd be more than happy to come down, give them a copy of what the standards were, and test their area for them.
Okay. And then his second comment was, in light of Ellsworth's strategic goal of moving toward more downtown walkability, increasing downtown community and tourism, and especially considering how popular outdoor shopping and dining have become in the pandemic, can we consider an ordinance against large vehicle engine brakes on Main Street? Large log trucks and construction vehicles can be very disruptive. Obviously, these trucks aren't the main concern of this ordinance, not longer than 30 minutes, but maybe something to revisit. So with that, I don't see any other comments. I'm going to close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed. Councilors.
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the amendments to Chapter 23 to allow the use of a meter.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? One opposed. The motion passes. Item 17, public hearing and action on amendments to the City of Ellsworth Code of Ordinances, Chapter 4, Fire Protection and Prevention Ordinance.
Good evening. So, you should have received in your packet a proposed ordinance updates. They are color-coded, so to help you read through them and determine what has been suggested as being removed. That would be yellow and struck through. Underlined in green would be proposed new language. And there was one section in there that had a piece of the section that was actually out of order in comparison to the rest of the ordinance. And that was just simply the entire language was moved from one piece to another within the same section. And that would have been colored in blue. You are also given a couple of pages worth of explanation as to why each section had to be changed. Most of it was updates due to code reference changes. Some of it was language that was mostly with Inspector Hangy, as he worked with developers and contractors. There was some items that were a bit confusing due to the language, and the language that is being proposed tries to help alleviate some of that confusion. And I guess without going line by line, I'd be happy to help answer any questions that you may have. And if I can't do it, I brought Inspector Hangy along too.
Just basic question is that these are all requirements to update, get it current, and be consistent with where we need to be as a city.
That is correct, correct.
So I will open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. Any other questions or comments by the councilors? I'm seeing no public comments coming through. I'll close the, Council Kaplan?
Most of this applies to commercial buildings.
For the majority of it, yes. There is a few sections in there to one and two family dwellings as well, but that was mostly language that was making it to read a little bit more easy and be understandable.
Okay, so when we're talking sprinkler systems and things like that, that's commercial.
Correct.
I'll close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed.
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the updates as proposed to the Ellsworth City Ordinance, Chapter 4, Fire Protection and Prevention Ordinance.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Item 18, Council Order Number 122003, request of the city manager to renew the Franklin Street parking lot lease agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a long-standing arrangement that we've had with the church for the use of the Franklin Street parking lot. It was at one point a 25-year lease that expired in 2017. And from that point, due to some concerns about needed repairs to the parking lot, it was agreed upon that we would go year to year. The repairs have not been done to date, but currently there is no scheduled, planned improvements or maintenance to the parking lot. So it was decided out of simplicity to make the contract a 5-year agreement, which the church was agreeable to. So if approved, that's what we would like to enter into, a 5-year agreement for $1 a year lease for the Franklin Street parking lot.
Councilors?
Public comment?
Don't need to, because it's not a public hearing. And nobody's commented, so.
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the city manager to execute a lease agreement for the Franklin Street parking lot with the United Methodist Church of Ellsworth for a period of 5 years, extending from December 21st, 2020 to December 31st, 2025.
Second.
You have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Motion passes. Item 19, Council Order Number 122004, request of the Facilities Manager to award a contract for purchase and complete installation of a 60-kilowatt propane generator at the Union River Center of Innovation.
Steve on?
Steve, are you on the phone?
Does not appear.
Mr. Chairman, he may not be here, but
Oh, there we go.
Most of this applies to commercial buildings.
For the majority of it, yes. There is a few sections in there, the one for written law as well. That is mostly language that was making it really readable.
It's 2020.
When you're talking sprinkler systems.
Steve, can you, pause your Facebook playback, please?
Close the public hearing. Public hearing's closed.
doesn't that have a cord that-
I'm pressing everything.
You pulled the cord.
I couldn't do it either.
Okay, it's muted. Go.
Jason.
Councilor Phillips.
I've looked at, I've had some experience in this field, and reviewed the bids. And sitting here tonight, looking at it, a little light bulb came on to some little small part. They're asking for a 60 kW generator, okay? There's some code rules and whatever. If you read through the contract, I'll try not to be too stupid about this, but that's a 200 amp entrance that they're doing, 200 amps. A 60 kW generator produces 250. That's more than the capacity of the service. That's not allowed by code. It has to be, so you'd have the larger generator, they'd have to downsize the breaker to make it work. Bottom line is, that's over the size of the entrance. They don't need anything that large. I have no idea why you picked that. I forgot to ask it. It just came to me tonight. A 48 kW provides 200 amps, and it's less money and it's a different setup. So what I see in front of me, I missed before, and I should have brought it up before, and I apologize for that, but the bell came on.
I may be able to answer that question. My understanding is that they just put in a new 200 amp service, additional 200 amp service, so they have two. Would that,
According to what I read in these specs, there's one switch only, so they're only powering, when I went through that both times, they're only talking about one transfer switch, and it's only 200 amps. And if you have two 200 amp services, then you need two 200 amp transfer switches. One switch does not service 2 units. And by electrical code, they can't provide 250 amps into a service that's not rated for it. And in reality, a 200 amp entrance is only allowed to have 160 amps of load on it, per se. And depending on the type of load, it seems like the size of the set is larger than it needs to be. It seems like there's some stuff in that. And as I say, I looked at it, I went through it before, and I had some other questions, but then that bell came on tonight, just sitting here. So,
Sounds like we
my preference would be to, let's table this and discuss it a little bit more, or
I don't understand it well enough, so I'll defer to you.
What do they do now if the power goes out?
what's that?
What do they do if the power goes out now?
No, there is nothing there.
Right.
And they're trying to, part of the reason they need to do it is, some of the facilities in there have freezers and things that need to be kept cold as far as that. There are some essential things now that have been added to that Erkey Center that do need backup, would serve greatly for it, make that a better center.
Maybe if they're
And this,
storing the mRNA.
they managed to obtain funding to do it.
I think it's far bigger than what.
So I don't think it's a bad idea, but I think a little bit of engineering needs to be rethinked.
So, if we table it, what we can do is, if we need to have a special meeting to approve it so that they can get it right sized and get that installed as quickly as possible, we could look at doing that as well.
Something, yeah, but it's some, just got a little further discussion about how we got there.
Do you want to make a
I was
motion?
in on the initial, I don't remember how it got to where it is.
Or do we want to authorize the city manager to approve it once the,
And by the way, there is no rush. If we order this, if you approve that tonight, none of this product is available from anywhere from 4 to 6 months.
Oh.
Switches or sets. That's how much delay time there is, no matter who the manufacturer is. There aren't any sitting on the ground anywhere.
The 60 kilowatt generator produces.
Do you want to make a motion? Do
Steve is,
you want to make a motion and
Steve
then you
is
can hear
trying
it?
to, apparently, he was supposed to be remoting in, but he's apparently having some
Yeah,
difficulty, so.
that's enough. We'll waste his time, I'd say. Move to table.
Second.
Motion and second to table. All those in favor? Item is tabled. Item 20, Council Order Number 122005, discussion and action on EMS services within the city of Ellsworth. Who from the EMS committee would like to kick this off?
They'll all speak at once.
John, you want to do it?
Glenn, would you like to?
I can certainly start, yeah, I'm sorry, I was trying to get hold of Steve.
No.
Yeah, so the EMS committee has reconvened, and we have met twice in an effort to try to move forward with a resolution involving Northern Light Medical Transport and the current situation with them being housed in the fire department, their wish to move out of the current arrangement into their own housing arrangements, and the need from them in order to do that to enter into a long-term service agreement with the city of Ellsworth. The current arrangement, Northern Light Medical Transport pays the city $10,000 and is housed in our fire department. And we do not currently pay a service agreement with Northern Light Medical Transport for EMS services to our community. The committee has met twice. Initially, the information was brought to myself and at the time outgoing city manager Cole by Northern Lights back in September. Due to COVID and the election and of course, the city manager departing, there was some delay in reconvening the committee to discuss the future, but we have done that now. Initially, there was some interest in seeing about possibly negotiating a better rate with Northern Lights, being that we're in the middle of a fiscal year and certainly not in a position to just pull out the checkbook and write a check for ambulance service. So an effort was made. I reached out to Mr. Morsehead from Northern Light Medical Transport. We met. I felt we had a very productive meeting and discussed many of the issues and concerns from both parties. At that meeting, I asked, and he did come and provide a few days later, a document with some reduced per capita costs for a 3-year service agreement, the first year of which we're in the midst of. So it's actually more of a 2.5-year service agreement. And when I brought that information back to the committee, the talk was, among other things, there's the belief that we need to make sure that we provide adequate ambulance service to our residents. That's first and foremost. And going forward, aside of putting all other issues aside or feelings of being deceived or that something more is going on or not having all of the facts or all of the information. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the most important thing is to ensure that we're providing adequate ambulance service to our citizens. And throughout the committee discussion, there was a lot of discussion about expanding our own EMS capacity and looking at eventually at some point possibly providing it ourselves for an ambulance service out of the city of Ellsworth. There was a lot of talk about what the future might look like with Northern Lights and Northern Light Medical Transport. And then there has been talk in the past about exploring other options.
reaching out to other providers to see if there are other ambulance services out there who are interested in coming into the market to provide the citizens of Ellsworth with emergency medical ambulance service. Some of the other concerns that we've certainly talked about in the committee is the issue of the outlying communities. Northern Lights not only provides EMS service, emergency 911 service to Ellsworth, but it also provides it to many of the smaller towns that surround Ellsworth. And the concern would be that if they no longer had Ellsworth, if we were, for example, to provide it ourselves for our citizens, and they didn't have the call volume of Ellsworth, that would further negatively impact their ability to provide services for the surrounding communities as well. So that's certainly a concern that the committee has talked about, and something that going forward I think we need to also take into consideration, with the caveat being that obviously our primary focus is on the citizens of Ellsworth. So what I've brought forward tonight, I provided you an updated service agreement with the negotiated terms that Mr. Morsehead and I spoke about. Certainly for your consideration, not necessarily for action tonight, but at least to consider. And I've also provided some financial information that was requested by Councilor Grindle. And at that, I'll leave it to members of the committee to fill in any gaps that I may have left out.
Sounded like a pretty good synopsis of what we discussed, that we're at this point, not by any choice of our own, but by being in a position where there's basically a monopoly pretty much has become in effect in healthcare in our region, in our area, and we have one service provider that has the ability to do it. And we have an intense need to, or responsibility, I guess, to try and protect our citizens and provide safe transport when needed, when a medical emergency arises. And it looks as if, one way or another, we're going to subsidize this. We're either going to be subsidizing it through Northern Lights, or if there was another ambulance service, that, or by establishing one of our own. And I guess the biggest question is, to what extent, to how much we do it. The agreement here allows us some reduction in cost to get started, and also allows us some time to make a decision how to move forward from this point, and yet still provide, as well as we can, emergency services for the citizens that live in this town.
I would add that Mr. Morsehead is here from Northern Light Medical Transport, and of course our fire personnel command staff is here as well to answer specific questions about our current EMS capacity and what the future might look like.
Currently, our firefighters are going on the calls anyway. And so, they were on, in the latest report, there were 86 calls that they went on just for last month. Now, even at a basic level, that would have nearly paid for 86 times 12 even. If you put that into a 12-month period, multiplying that by the average payment, that would have paid for the EMS service, if we were able to bill as a city through Medicare, Medicaid, and insurance.
I would just caution you that out of those 86, I would dare venture a guess that a very high percentage of those folks were not actually transported. And you're only generating income for the ambulance service when they're actually transported.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the calls, and certainly, please, interrupt fire department, but a lot of the calls that they go on, lift assists, or someone's fallen and just needs help getting back up, somebody's sick but, denies transport, car accidents where you get on scene and people refuse medical treatment. So a lot of those calls, the 86 calls, the percentage of people who actually got into the ambulance and then were transported to the hospital is significantly lower than the 86 that calls that they've responded to. And then you have to figure into that, beyond that, the folks who didn't have any insurance at all, and therefore, will not be paying. So all of those types of things are figured into the, to the cost of operating.
And I would just add, in terms of, I think that the road of looking at the city establishing its own ambulance service is complex, and it's beyond just the service itself, because it would not just be the existing firefighter crew, it would be add-on. So now we're talking about new additional employees, and you have to have more employees, you have to staff that, you have to recruit for that. I think the city would want to know what the retention rate is for that type of position, how easy, how difficult it is to recruit for that, to maintain the service, and what happens when you're not able to recruit and you don't have that on staff. And then beyond that, billing alone, once you start getting into billing Medicare or main care or private insurances, that takes a different level of skill set that doesn't currently exist within the city. You're going to add another administrative position or two just to manage that. There's that component of it. So I just caution that in terms of it going down that, I'm not saying let's not look at that, but I think it's much bigger in terms of really understanding the infrastructure that would be needed to have our own service. Now, with that said, I also think that understanding what it is that we're purchasing in partnership is also critically important in terms of what that looks like and what we can expect and what we're paying for and what that relationship really is. And I certainly have some questions about the nature of the contract and what that means going forward. So I just throw that out as if we go down the road of exploring it, just be aware that I think it's more complex than just, do we have people trained? It's going to be a heavy lift for us to do that.
Perfectly true, but it's not a 2 or 3 month discussion, it's a 6 month or a year discussion to do that. And
Agreed.
we're set at that point that we as a council need to make a decision. Northern Lights needs to know what's going on, they need to make plans, and it's something that we have to plan for at this point. But if we did move ahead, it is further out, it's a 2 or 3 year process, there's no doubt in my mind.
Which is in large part why, as a committee, part of the discussion was around a service agreement affords us the opportunity to not only further explore, but then if a decision is made that we do want to go in the direction of expanding our own EMS capacity within the city, that we can do that both fiscally responsible and in a timely manner, not overnight, but in a slow growth pattern. So instead of adding 6 employees and $1 million worth of equipment, we add 2 employees one year, and we can add a couple employees the next year. So we can control the growth in a responsible way, control the cost somewhat in a responsible way, and then work towards the end goal of being able to enhance our capacity and provide a better service to our community.
So I got a couple questions. I mean, how many ambulances does a town the size of Ellsworth require to be effective?
I'm Ed Morris, and I'm the Director of Northern Line Medical Transport. So for all of Hancock County, when we first came down here, we looked at the numbers, and for the entire city of Ellsworth and the 9 or 10 towns that we serve outside of Ellsworth, about 1.5 ambulances would be ideal. But there's no such thing as 0.5 ambulances. So we have 2 ambulances down here. And as the folks that have been on the council for 2 or 3 years will remember, I remember vividly being on the top floor here and saying, there'll be days when you need 5 ambulances here. And there'll be days when you don't need any. And there's no predicting that. But on average, 2 ambulances seem to serve pretty well. We move ambulances back and forth from Bangor to Ellsworth every day, many times a day. And we're able to backfill that way. I think I gave Manager Mosier some numbers back in the summer that we were answering 97% of the calls without calling mutual aid in Hancock County.
What's like average response time have you had in the last
For the city
year
of
or so?
Ellsworth, the average response time, as I recall, and you have the numbers on that too, are from the tone to on scene is about 6.2 minutes. I'm going on memory on that one, but I think I'm pretty close to being correct.
Sounds about right. I'm only mentioning this because somebody told me, and I'm not sure if it's true, this is what they told me, that it was a 2-hour and 15-minute wait one day, and they ended up getting an ambulance out of Bar Harbor.
I find 2 hours and 15 minutes hard to believe, but I find that there'll be days when outliers will lead to a 25 or 30-minute response. I'll admit to that, but those are outliers. Those are very small percentages of the time, and by that time, Peninsula Ambulance is 15 miles away.
Yeah. But I just want to, like
Yeah,
I say,
yeah.
I didn't know if it was true. I was told that, and I'm like, wow, that just seems,
It does seem a little outrageous, but
so 2 ambulances is enough 99% of the time,
yeah, 97% of the time it is.
97% of the time.
And that's with a lot of movement. Last night, for instance, last night Trenton had a shooting, a double shooting.
Right.
We had 2 ambulances go to that. We had an ambulance from Bangor headed for Ellsworth.
Yeah, I was just trying to get an idea. And that's for Ellsworth and the 10 surrounding communities.
Correct. The problem is with just putting 1 ambulance in Ellsworth, Ellsworth does about 950 calls a year. So if you say, I can have 1 ambulance, and 1 ambulance can do 950 calls a year, and it certainly can. And the problem is, you wouldn't capture 950 calls because some of those calls are 2 at a time or 3 at a time. So who's gonna do the second or third call if you have a double call or a triple call? Because those do happen. So it isn't quite as simple. Yes, ma'am?
What percentage of your calls are interfacility transports?
There's 960 emergency calls in Hancock County. You can see on the paper you've got here, this is for FY20. Our fiscal year runs from October to September. The non-emergencies at the bottom they're fewer than the emergencies. Most of those come out of Maine Coast, some of them come out of MDI and Blue Hill. And those are most of the time, the vast majority of those calls are done by trucks out of Bangor, not the trucks here in Ellsworth.
Most of these are just transports where somebody comes down, and somebody sits in the hospital for 3 or 4 hours and waits for them, or,
The emergencies or the non-emergencies?
no, the non-emergencies.
The
Like when they get
non-emergencies-
transferred from Ellsworth to
Most of
Eastern
them
Maine.
are going to a high level of care in Eastern Maine. 2-3 weeks ago, the CAT scan broke at Maine Coast, and we took people to Blue Hill for a week, 30 or 35 people in a week, because the CAT scan was broken. So calls like that.
So
Under the new agreement, you'll still have 2 here in
Correct.
Ellsworth, and then 1 in Holden?
We stage in Lucerne at the Lucerne Fire
Lucerne, sorry,
Station,
yeah.
so it's a dynamic staging where it's worked very well. Where if one of the ambulances in Ellsworth goes outside the town, the city limits on a call, we'll send the truck to Bangor to sit at Lucerne. The second truck is still in the basement here. If that truck goes out, that truck moves all the way to Ellsworth.
So one of the concerns I have is, we're in the midst, and you addressed this in terms of one of the reasons for wanting to move is related to COVID. We're in the midst of COVID. We're being impacted as a community, and most likely we'll see that in terms of decisions we have to make as far as budgeting is concerned. So to be sitting here in this fiscal year and being asked to pay a per capita rate now to the end of the fiscal year, when we have not had a chance to really have this kind of conversation and process, that I'm not comfortable with that. I think a fair approach would be that we would be talking about July 1 with the new fiscal year, so that we can responsibly put it into the budget for the taxpayers of this community to know that we've discussed it and vetted it and not incur an expense for this current year. So that's one concern I have with the proposal. It's being dropped, and you may need a commitment so that you can make plans. But in terms of the fee, I think that's a separate discussion and a separate issue that I would hope we would be able to talk about, because I don't think it's fair to the taxpayers for this to just come out of the blue. And I appreciate the fact that we've had a change and things, but I was part of the original discussion, and this is the first time this dropped in terms of this kind of proposal. So that's a concern for me.
Can I address that? Sure. So this didn't come out of the blue. It came 3 months ago, and it was actually almost 3 months to the day that I went to then manager Cole, and it was his last day on the job actually, and said, "This is really concerning to us. We need to make a change." I will tell you that last night at roughly this time of night, the City of Brewers fire chief called me, and we have a paramedic in their fire station, and they had an employee that tested positive, and they found out last night at 8:30. 2/3 of their fire department is on 14-day quarantine today. One of my paramedics says, they didn't expect to have that happen to them, no more than we would downstairs here. We're trying to avoid things like that from happening. At Thanksgiving, I had 8 employees in Dexter test positive and got put out of work. And took that whole base at Dexter out of service for the citizens in that area. This is for real, the COVID, which is why in September I went to the managers and said, I think we need to do something about this so that we can get into more space. 2 years ago when we came, there was talk of a new public safety building that was supposed to be bigger. And I realized that was maybe pie in the sky at the time. And it turned out that it's very expensive, and I understand very expensive very well. And that wasn't a possibility. And certainly with COVID now, it isn't a possibility. However, I did go back and negotiate with Manager Mosier to lower the per capita rate, not started until April, which is, what, 2 or 3 months before your fiscal year ends, at a much reduced rate of $4. So we did make some strides in trying to get that number lower than it was so that you could make budget plans for that.
But the relocation isn't happening. Your relocation it's not that you have a facility to move tomorrow.
Correct.
And you're asking for a commitment so that you can make a commitment on this facility, have it built out to specs, so that you can move into it at the end of the contract that you have with the city currently.
We would hope that they would, my guess is it would take 3 or 4 months to move into it because there's some building that needs to be done and we have some code work that needs to be done with it. And so it would be probably April by the time we could move into someplace like that. However, in September, when I came to the managers, I thought, well, if we could get this and get a discussion going about it, we could get into it before wintertime came too bad and move on. But COVID hasn't made things easy, and the manager leaving and the interim manager, I understand that, and the election.
Are you charging the surrounding towns a per capita rate?
We are.
And what is it?
Pardon me?
Is it the same that you wanted to charge?
It's actually more.
What is the per capita rate for? You pay, like, each citizen, you pay so much per citizen in Ellsworth. I mean, what does
it go towards?
I guess I don't get what that's for.
It's to subsidize the amount of money that we get to stay in business. We don't get paid enough by our patients to keep the service going. We're scheduled to lose about $450,000 this year, and so far, in the first 2 months of our budget year, it looks like we'll be right on target to do that.
Is that system-wide or just Hancock?
That's Northern Light Medical Transport.
That's the whole.
Yeah, not just Hancock County, but Northern Light Medical Transport as a whole. Northern Light Health is going to lose a lot more than that.
Is any of that attributed to, is that unique to situation with COVID? Or is that?
It did play a factor with COVID. Some of these numbers the FY20 numbers do reflect COVID and impacting that a bit. We did get some money from the government that offset some of that, but probably the negative 270,000 there would probably be closer to negative maybe 200 to 225,000 without the COVID being here. People started to get afraid to go to the hospital. They stopped calling 911. And when the elective procedures were stopped at the hospitals back in the spring, it was a dramatic decrease in volume, which I didn't expect.
I expected it the way they talked about it and scared everybody half to death. Not surprised anybody left that house.
But it certainly wasn't our intent to blindside anybody or to be deceiving in any way. We want to be a partner to Ellsworth for years to come. We want to be a partner to Hancock County with EMS. We're owned by the same company that owns Maine Coast Hospital. We want to be here for the long run, and we're not trying to. We're trying to stay in business and be able to provide a quality product.
I have one comment, Mr. Chairman. EMS, EFD, 50 years ago last month, the city contracted Dale Berry to run a service in Ellsworth, $12,000 a year. What guarantee do they give? They have an ambulance available at the city at all times. They can't, at his right. Sometimes you will need 5 or more. Chief Tuffer suggested training 1 employee per year. I suggest 2. Always easier to work as a team and study together, not alone. City-based EMS will never pay for itself without transfers. This proposal is a good start. Gary Fourier.
And I have a question on the proposed rate that you guys have given the city. It says on April 1st of next year, Ellsworth would pay NLMT $4 a head, roughly $32,000, give or take. 3 months later, on July 1st, we would pay $7 per capita.
That would be prorated, the $4 for the remaining April, May, and June. If it isn't written that way, it should be.
The $4 would be prorated?
So when Manager
Something roughly
Mosier and I
about-
got together, we tried to come up with a plan where we could realize that you hadn't budgeted for this. So if your fiscal year starts, is it July 1st? So from April, May, and June would be prorated at $4 per capita. Then July 1st would become $7 for that year. And then the next year would go to $9.50.
So, I'm just as confused now. So we would pay $4 per capita on April 1st, or $1?
Well, I guess you could call it $1 because it's prorated. It would be 3 months,
Okay.
if I understand your math correctly.
A couple of other things. Under special services, 2.6.4. From time to time, NLMT may provide municipality employees with education services. Can you define time to time, and NLMT may provide?
So I guess I can ask.
Is that up to you guys?
I guess I can, well, have you ever been denied education when you've asked for it? I guess for CPR classes or CEH classes or things like that. That's what we're talking about with that. Like, although COVID has certainly put a real damper on getting people involved in a classroom at the same time.
Oh, I understand that, it's just the way that it's worded.
Yeah, and that's the way the lawyers write it. It's that way in all our contracts, but we actually have, before COVID, we actually had specific days where we did training for outlying departments, not just here, but Dixmont or Newburgh or places like that, where it was scheduled on a particular night. And that's what that addresses. When COVID came, it was discouraged that we get together in the same room at the same time. We've tried to do online classes, they don't work quite as well. But we can let Chief Tupper speak to that.
I'll just reiterate what Ed has said. The COVID thing has made it very difficult to do classroom-type training. However, the crews do work together as best they can to discuss EMS protocols and types of things to do. I can recall a few times prior to COVID really taking over our lives, where a couple of the paramedics did come in and do particular classes, as you would imagine, for the groups that were there, yes. It hasn't been the best of scenario, but what has, I guess, unfortunately. I don't think it's any fault of anybody's, it's just the life we're in right now.
Okay, thank you.
So you talk about the lawyers getting together. I guess the, one of the things that struck me is that what you're asking for is to subsidize, to help to be able to operate a service for the community,
Sure.
for the residents, which absolutely, I mean, we need to have the resource. This contract reads more like a service agreement between the city and Northern Light Medical Transportation versus a subsidy of a service. There's language about liability and indemnity and what you will do and what the city will do. And I just wonder if we need to look at the structure of that for what it is. It's a subsidy. You're agreeing to do certain things, and the city is agreeing to provide subsidy. But the city is not, we're not in any way contracting you, your relationship with any call you go to, anybody you transport, any person you treat. The city has no involvement in that relationship. That's you.
That's correct.
And this contract reads more like that we're somehow a party to that process.
So what we're promising you is that we're going to make every effort to answer every 911 call for emergency medical services. And you are able to go back to the citizens and say that we've made arrangements for that. I guess it's in simple terms.
Yeah, I'm just saying that I think it goes beyond that. So that's one of the things I would want the city attorney to look at.
So that's the same contract we have with about 90 towns.
Well, I'm just sharing with you my opinion.
Yeah, that's okay.
I'm letting
I'm
you
just-
know
and
that
I'm saying that
I
that's
have a
been-
question
Yeah.
about that and whether or not the contract should look different.
And that's been, I understand your trepidation. It's been out there for quite a few years. It's been tweaked a little bit here and there by both sides probably over the years. But that's the same contract we have with all the other towns in Hancock County currently, that they signed 2.5 years ago.
Councilor Kaplan.
So if we are paying for this service, is there a vicarious liability malpractice-wise, for example?
To the city?
Yes.
I would doubt that. I'm not an attorney. We do have a very large malpractice insurance program at Northern Light Health, so I think it spells out $5 million in the contract.
So is the committee recommending a certain action tonight, or?
Well, we pretty much, we don't have an ambulance right now, do we? So the recommendation is that, we discuss it, take a look at it. There's not much we can do about it. Can't leave the people of Ellsworth unprotected.
What would happen if you said you didn't go along with it or whatever? I mean, somebody calls for an ambulance, they just don't get taken to the hospital?
We're not leaving. We're not that way.
So, for me, I support a good partnership. We need to work in partnership for the citizens of this community. That I have no problem with. But like anything, we also have that responsibility to make sure that it's a responsible decision in terms of vetting the contract, looking at it to represent the community. And so for me, I think there are some questions, and what I would be comfortable with is to endorse the process, to have the manager work with the attorney, vet some of these questions that we have, get those answered, to move the process forward in good faith, and work as quickly as possible to bring forward a final contract. So for me, that's where I would like us to move, is in that direction. I'm not at all comfortable sitting here tonight to be able to say that I have 100% comfort with the contract the way it reads at this point.
Where's your new facility gonna be?
It's on, I believe it's East Main Street, the 400 block, where the home care and hospice building is. Washington Junction Road.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm in agreement with the Councilor Hamilton that we should, we all agreed that we should move forward with looking at this contract, but getting it today and then deciding on it immediately is really not acceptable either. So I think we should go through with the lawyers
And I guess I'll reiterate once again that every day we spend in the fire station here is another day that we could potentially put 8 people out of work for 14 days.
But you're gonna be there until April anyway, right?
Yeah, that's why I came in
So,
September.
It's not gonna be April 2nd compared to April 1st if we don't agree on tonight.
That's correct. I understand that. I just, I'd like to find out a timeline on, because I am really concerned about that. I worry about my employees. And,
We understand that.
and I understand that you have to do your due diligence here too.
I mean, if we take another week to talk about it, or another,
Well, I guess I want to respond to that.
in the end, it's
because
gonna probably be the outcome.
What you brought in September was the same proposal in terms of saying that you wanted a contract, you needed it signed so you could make a decision. COVID, having safety around, your crew are at risk in many settings. And I understand that. Our fire department, they're at risk in the same setting. The precautions that people are taking is taking as great as precautions as possible to protect that. You're not, if we decided tonight, you're not moving out until after April. You will have long been vaccinated before that. EMS is high on the list. So that is not a fair representation for you to make to the community, to say that, boy, if we don't make a decision, we're putting your crew at risk, at greater risk. I think that's an unfair statement to make, and quite frankly, is not accurate.
I disagree. I think that the vaccine hasn't been proven, as we learned tonight. We don't know if this is going to work or not.
I think
It's 95% effective.
But it's only been 3 months since somebody started.
95% effective.
I understand that, sir, but
I think your
I think no matter
hospital
what, you're there.
system, I think your hospital system tonight said the exact
Jim Jarvis
opposite.
is wonderful. They're very.
I think he said the exact opposite of what you
Yeah,
just said.
and they're very optimistic, and I'm hopefully optimistic as well, and I really hope that they're right.
Councilors, do you want to make a motion?
We're not gonna take action, the only other choice would be to table for
Exactly.
further discussion. And at that point, there will be no more discussion, which sounds nice. I move to table.
A second.
You have a motion, and a second. All in favor of tabling? Motion passes.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Cool. Item 21, executive session to discuss personnel matters in accordance with the MRSA Title I, Chapter 13, Section 405, Paragraph 6A.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? We're moving into executive session, and we will have a report out. And I think we are back. All right, we have come out of executive session. The council has, after discussions and review based on our search for a new city manager, we've had some additional discussions with interim city manager Glenn Mosier, and we have made a decision that the Personnel Committee we'll start a process to negotiate with Chief Mosier to step into that role on a permanent basis. So that's the direction we are heading at this point, and we'll start those negotiations as soon as possible. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Yay.
We are adjourned.